Do you have to be wealthy to own a Tesla? Let's talk about it. Good morning, guys. Well, this is a subject that has come up on my channel a couple of times. A number of people have mentioned that I'd love to buy a Tesla, but I'm not rich, or you must be rich to own a Tesla. One of my videos, which I'll link in the description below and at the end of this video, had to do with a client coming out of his home and following me out to my car, only to begin yelling at me when I showed up in such an expensive car. So I wanted to address that. Do you need to be wealthy to own a Tesla? Now, I'm going to give you an answer here, but don't just tune out. Listen to my explanation. Do you have to be wealthy to own a Tesla? The answer is yes, but there's a caveat to that. It depends on your definition of wealth, or being wealthy. So wealth is merely accumulation of assets. So you don't have to be wealthy to have a certain level of wealth. When somebody says, you know, what's your level of wealth? Well, you could say, oh, I own this car, I have whatever, this much equity in my house, I have this much in my savings account. Wealth is just a term meaning asset. You know, what is your net worth? To be wealthy is excess. Now, the way I define wealth is more than I need, but then the word need is difficult to define. So need could just be defined simply as, at its essence, food, sustenance, clothing, shelter. So bread and water, a roof over your head, and basic clothes. Those are really your needs. But then what about the need for companionship, you know, friends? What about the need for, you know, whatever? We define needs, especially in first world countries like America, differently than much of the rest of the world defines need. So we may need a house in a decent neighborhood so that our kids don't have bad influences. Or we may need central air conditioning because, you know, the weather is hot and humid in the summers here in northern Illinois. Or we may need a new car, whether it be a Tesla or any other car, because our other car is becoming less reliable. Right now, my wife and I have discussed needing another car because we have a 15-year-old son who's got a permit. The 3 cars that we have currently at our home, we own 4, but one is lent out to one of our adult children. But we have 3 cars available at our home. My Model 3, my 15-year-old isn't driving that. My Civic Si, he's not driving that. For one thing, it's stick shift, and he's just learning to drive. I don't want to have to introduce stick shift into the mix just yet. My wife's car, it's a really big car. She's got a Fusion, all-wheel drive Ford Fusion, great car. But it's a really big car, and honestly, she doesn't have a lot in her life that is specifically hers and hers alone. So I'd really rather not have him learning to drive on that car. So we need another car for him to practice on. Maybe a little smart car, smart electric car, or something like that. But see, need can mean a number of different things. So when I say, do you have to be wealthy to own a Tesla? I give the yes answer because worldwide, in order to live and exist in northern Illinois, I live in northeastern Illinois, it's an area with a relatively strong economy. Now, the state of Illinois is a whole nother subject, but Northeast Illinois is a pretty strong local economy. It's an expensive area to live, and if you can live in Northeast Illinois, then you are in the wealthiest, probably 1% in the world. Now, I'm not a millionaire, nowhere close. I live in a townhouse, but my wife and I own 4 cars. I have a small rental property. I have a couple small businesses. I mean, again, I'm not a millionaire, but we do fine. We're not in need for anything. And when you look at worldwide, we are very wealthy people, very, very wealthy people. But for Northeast Illinois, we're about average. So to be wealthy based on our area would mean that I probably need to have $1 million of holdings and be earning $250,000 a year in order to be considered wealthy in our area. And I am nowhere near that. So am I wealthy? Well, not for our area, not at all. I'm average. But am I wealthy overall from a worldwide standpoint? Absolutely yes. So anyway, just thought it was a nice, brief, interesting topic to bring up. You guys, please give me comments down below. I really want to know how you guys feel about this, because again, wealth is really relative. I actually know 2 billionaires with a B, 2 billionaires and many multimillionaires. And looking at, if you're in a third world country and you're looking at myself living in a tiny little townhouse, and one of my multimillionaire friends, their house is probably 4 times the size of mine, but I have 4 cars. Each of them probably have 4 or 5 cars. Now they have far more costly cars, but from a third world person's perspective, if you're living in a garbage dump or whatever, and you're living in the hills in China somewhere, rural China, to look at my life versus the life of a multimillionaire, from their perspective, there is very little, if any, difference at all. I live in a nice house with central air conditioning, hot and cold running water, and a curved HD TV, and you know, wireless broadband, and you know, all of this stuff. Multiple cars. We have 2 cars that have been bought brand new within the last year. We look to them just as wealthy as a multimillionaire, even though I know that, well, I'm going to have to work for another 20 years before I can retire. Those multimillionaires either are retired or could retire right now. So from my perspective, I'm not wealthy, they are. But from, again, a third world resident's perspective, I'm just as wealthy or in the same category as that multimillionaire that I would know. So anyway, interesting topic. Please let me know what your take is on this. And go ahead and give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you later.